Put yourself in position to win big on Kentucky Derby Day with the power of daily racing form. Visit shop.drf.com and get past performances, expert picks, betting strategies, clock reports, and more. Again, that's shop.drf.com. Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Mike Beer, the DRF race of the day for Saturday, May 6th. The first Saturday in May is, of course, the Grade 1 Kentucky Derby, race number 12 at Churchill Downs. 3-year-olds going the classic distance of 1.25 miles. $3 million is the purse. Let's take a look at this field. Please scan or click the QR code for race of the day access on mobile, including formulator past performances. 20 horses entered the Kentucky Derby, 3 on the also eligible list. The 21 Cyclone Mischief, the 22 Mandarin Hero, the 23 King Russell will need some scratches in order to participate in this year's Run for the Roses. Morning line favorite, deserved morning line favorite, last year's 2-year-old champion, the number 15 Forte, who has come back as strong at 3, knocking him off in the Fountain of Youth in the Florida Derby.
Yeah, he was obviously really good last year, Dan. He's a deserving favorite here into the Kentucky Derby. Todd Pletcher sort of given him a light campaign so far at 3. They're hoping that he runs his best race in the Derby here. His stablemate, Tapit, Trice, second choice on the morning line. He could vie for favoritism here, Dan. There's a little bit of steam behind this horse.
Let's throw up the Timeform US pace projector for this race. Our friends at Timeform US believe this pace will be fast. The number 17, Derma Sotogake, who won a fast edition of the UAE Derby in gate-to-wire fashion. He's also won from off the pace in the past. He is expected to make the lead on our pace projector. Confidence game can be close, although he rallied in his most recent start. Personally, Mike, I think the plan for the number 2 Verifying is to go, go, go.
Yeah, maybe that his hand has been forced now that he's drawn down inside in post 2, but he's got speed. I think they will go forward as well. I mean, I suppose Derma Sotogake could go towards the front here. They have confidence game up close. He's been in some fast-paced races recently, but he doesn't need the lead. The 12, Jace's Road, to me, he's mid-pack pace projector. He feels like a horse who's going from the gate in this race. I'm not really sure how this pace is going to shake out, but it could be fast.
It should be pretty fast with 20 horses scrimmaging for position as they pass under the Twin Spires for the first time. The number 1 Hit Show was saddled with a tough post in the Wood Memorial. Far outside in a field of 12, tough post in the Derby. Very few horsemen want to be saddled with the rail. Hit Show ran well in the Wood Memorial despite post 12. Ended up getting a pretty good trip under Manny Franco and just missed in between horses late. I liked his win in the Withers 2 starts back. This horse has ability, and he's not too far off the other top contenders in terms of speed figures. He'll have to improve a little bit, and he'll have to work something out from the rail.
Yeah, just needs a little bit of a forward move here. He is going to need the right kind of trip, too. The good thing about Hit Show is, listen, maybe the rail's not ideal. I don't think it's, necessarily a terrible post position for him. He's a pretty handy horse, though. I mean, I don't think he's going to be part of the pace early, but I don't think he's going to be way, way back in the field either, assuming he can get out of the gate in this race. He's handy. He still finishes pretty well in his races. Obviously, the New York preps, they probably weren't the toughest ones, but he looked good winning the Withers, sitting close to a fast pace. And he had enough excuses in the Wood Memorial, Dan, I think, to give him a pass for just missing as the favorite that day. With a clean trip, I think he can factor in this race at a price.
His stablemate is right next door. That's the number 2 Verifying by Triple Crown winner Justify, a half-brother to the very good multiple Grade 1 winner Midnight Bizou. Verifying won his career debut sprinting on the lead at Saratoga on Travers Day, was Grade 1 placed at 2. I think he's done good things in all 3 of his starts this year. Rock solid first level allowance win, had trouble in the Rebel on a wet track 2 starts back, and gave Tapit Trice all he could handle in the Bluegrass last time out.
Really good performance in the Bluegrass last time off of a really good trip, too. He's clearly improved as a 3-year-old, Dan. All 3 of his races leading up to this are really good, and he ran the best race of his life in his most recent start. He had no excuse there. He was only second best, but he still ran really well. It gives him a chance against this field. If he can get the right trip, and if he can get the 1.25 miles, I'm really concerned about this distance for him, Dan. He's a Justify. I know Midnight Bizou was really good. I don't think that she wanted to go this far, and I'm not sure that Verifying does either.
The number 3 is Two Phils. He was a graded stakes winner at Churchill Downs as a 2-year-old, and after a couple of useful starts without winning at the fairgrounds over the winter, he exploded to a career best performance in the Jeff Ruby Stakes. He earned a 101 Beyer speed figure. He looked very good doing it, but the question has to be asked. Was it the synthetic surface that propelled Two Phils to that form, or is it simply the case of a lightly raced horse coming into his own at the right time, or maybe it's a combination of both?
Yeah, it could be a combination of both. That is the real question surrounding him, though, Dan, because he certainly looked good winning that race in fast time, albeit on a different surface and probably against a weaker field as well. But it's not like his dirt form prior to that wasn't any good. So maybe he just took the step forward regardless of surface. I personally couldn't really find huge excuses for his Lecomte or his Risen Star. I thought he ran fine in those races. I didn't think he had big excuses either time, and just sort of came up short at the end. So we'll see if if he's a new horse now and he can continue to improve as they switch him back to dirt here. If he does, I think he's a contender in this race. I would want a pretty big price though.
12-1 on the morning line. Jareth Loveberry takes the mount. The number 4 is Confidence Game, who finished behind Two Phils in the Grade 3 Lecomte, but then utilized a new running style when winning the Grade 2 Rebel for Keith DeZormo. Let's watch this race. This is a sloppy track race. Reincarnate's going to finish 3rd with a little trouble. Verifying will finish 4th with a little trouble. Confidence Game stayed to the outside, away from any sort of trouble. We see he's on his left lead right now, splashing through the stretch, but he gets it done. He runs a 94 Beyer. Mike, he's coming into this race off a little bit of a layoff. The Rebel was in late February.
Yeah, flying a little bit under the radar now because they skipped the final round of preps with him. But at least in that race, the most recent start, he showed the necessary improvement. He needed to take a step forward there, and he did it. And I like that he did it with a little bit of a different running style too, Dad, because back in the Lecomte, he was part of a pretty fast pace before he got tired and finished 3rd. That had a fast pace too, the Rebel, but they sat off it, came wide, and got the job done. He needs to improve again, but he feels like he's going to get totally overlooked in here.
The number 5, Tapit Trice, he ticks a lot of boxes. A 7-figure yearling purchase by the great stallion Tapit. He's trained by Todd Pletcher. He's won his last 4 starts, 2 important Kentucky Derby preps, the Tampa Bay Derby and the Bluegrass. Let's watch the Bluegrass. I think Louis Saez won this race on the first turn, getting off the rail. Tapit Trice seems to like racing outside of horses. He's outside of Verifying. And I like the fact that Tapit Trice has got to fight a little bit in the final furlong. He ran a 99 Beyer. Finally, a fast race for this colt. Very talented. Distance shouldn't be a problem. What do you make of this post sort of near the inside? Are you worried he could be stuck behind horses?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's ideal for him because he does kind of feel like a horse who doesn't really want to be behind horses. He also, at least so far in his career, he's needed to be sort of hard ridden to make sure that he didn't get too far away early. So we'll see, how far back he winds up in this field early, Dan. I don't think there's any denying his talent. They paid up for this horse as a yearling, and he just keeps getting better every single time Pletcher sends him out there. The Bluegrass was the best race yet, and it was the best race by far. You don't have to worry about distance with this horse. I think if he gets a clean trip, he is super dangerous in this horse. This horse is good.
Next door is the 6, Kingsbarns, also trained by Todd Pletcher, undefeated from 3 lifetime starts. Took him all the way in the Louisiana Derby in his most recent start. Now, the Louisiana Derby was a race that just didn't have any pace. Flavien Prat, who was riding that day, was able to get Kingsbarns up front. They slowed the pace down to a crawl, and he sprinted home to beat 3 of these horses. He doesn't need the lead to win. He's very versatile, but he did have a candy trip in the Louisiana Derby, and he's also very light on experience. He did not race as a 2-year-old.
Yeah, those things are all sort of issues with this horse, especially when you just consider that, we'll see what kind of price he ultimately settles at, Dad, but there's a chance that he's not that interesting of price in this race. To me, 12-1 on the morning line is probably a little bit too short, but I won't deny his talent. I think he's looked good in all 3 of his races, but he just had all the best of it last time. And even that race with a soft trip on an easy pace, he didn't run a particularly fast race. He's got to improve again.
We talked about horses that could be forwardly placed. Maybe the 7 Reincarnate will be. It's sort of one of the big questions of the pace because this horse can do it either way. When he was trained by Bob Baffert, he won the Sham in pace-pressing fashion. He's run twice now for trainer Tim Yatin. They took him off the pace in the Rebel, a race we saw the replay of with Confidence Game, and he had a little bit of trouble finishing third. He pushed the pace last time out in the Arkansas Derby. No match for Angel of Empire. What tactics do you think he's going to use? How did you like his last race? Because maybe he was close to a fast pace, but he just didn't finish the way I want to see a horse in a final Derby prep.
Yeah, I didn't like his last race at all. And it was also worth pointing out that was the first time they went 1 1/8 with him, and he just didn't really have much of a finish. Personally, I didn't think he had any excuse at all in that race. He just didn't run well. I thought his Rebel was fine when they took him back, tried to make one run, and he got into a little bit of traffic there. His fastest race is the Sham, the 2-turn mile of Santa Anita. I didn't like that race either. I don't know what they're going to do with him here. Either way, whether he's part of the pace or whether they take him back, I don't really feel like I want to use this horse.
If the number 8 Mage breaks from the gate, he can be close to the pace, but that's one of the big ifs in this year's Kentucky Derby. Can he get out of the gate? And if he doesn't get out of the gate, he could be in big, big trouble in behind 15, 16 other horses. He's so inexperienced with only 3 starts and no 2-year-old foundation, but he's run well in his 2 races without breaking well. The Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby. He took on Forte both times, and he made Forte work in the latter race.
Yeah, he really did. It was a nice performance from him in the Florida Derby. The slow break obviously hindered him a little bit there. After that, I thought the trip was a really good one, but I also felt like he ran really well off of that good trip. Listen, it's obviously all about the break for him. He broke slowly in the Fountain of Youth. He broke slowly last time. If he does it again on Saturday, he's probably nowhere at the end of this race. The Derby is notoriously hard on horses with inexperience like this, so we'll see if he can overcome it. I think there's a chance he could be one of the major players in this division going forward. I just think they're asking an awful lot of him here on Saturday.
Trainer John Sheriffs has already won the Kentucky Derby with Giacomo. He'll try to do it again with the number 9 Skinner, and the normally conservative Sheriffs treated this horse like a good one last year, running him in a couple of graded stakes races, despite the fact that he had yet to break his maiden. He's run well in all 3 starts this year, including the Santa Anita Derby last time out, a race where the 1-2 finisher saved ground for most of the race. Skinner, on the other hand, had to come from out of it and wide, and he was still fighting. He's still a little bit green, but he's getting better with each start, and he's going to get some pace to run at.
Yeah, I think all those things are true. He's an interesting horse in this race if he goes off at some kind of big price. He ran legitimately well, I thought, in the Santa Anita Derby last time. He's another horse. He's a lot like Verifying in that I think he's really improved from 2 to 3, which is exactly what you want to see. He's another one I'm a little concerned about 1.25 miles for him, but if he can work out the right trip into a fast pace, I think he can be there at the end.
The only Derby entrant with 2 prior triple-digit Beyer speed figures is up next. That's the 10, Practical Move, the best from the West. He's won his last 3 races, all in graded stakes competition, including this race, the Santa Anita Derby. He gets good trips. He made an inside move on the turn to make the lead. He's in the 2-path turning for home. You see Skinner on the far outside. Mandarin Hero's going to split horses. Practical Move got the jump on him, and he's got to dig down deep this final 16th to hold him off.
Yeah, another horse. First start at 9 furlongs here, and he gets pretty desperate at the end of this race after getting the inside run into the stretch. He does hold on. I thought he was really game, Dan, to dig in there and get the job done. He's had 3 consecutive graded stakes wins where he got the same trip. Sat right in behind, got through on the inside at the top of the stretch, and went on with it. I know he didn't, he made it close last time. I'm still not that worried about distance with this horse. I feel like if he falls into another trip here, he could very well be on the lead in the stretch here, and he won't be easy to run down.
He's just the kind of horse that seems to work out his own trip in any race and can place the jockey wherever he wants to be within the context of the race shape. The 11 is Disarm, trained by Steve Asmussen. This is a son of Gun Runner, ran well in both starts as a 2-year-old. I was very impressed with his maiden victory at Saratoga in his second lifetime start. Now, unfortunately, he missed the rest of the year, so maybe Steve Asmussen was just a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of getting him back to the races. While he hasn't won done this year. I think he's done good things, or at least did good things in his first 2 starts. His first start off the layoff, he got wired in a slow-paced race. In the Louisiana Derby, he got wired in a slow-paced race, and he rallied for second despite traffic. This race, the Lexington, was not his best, going a mile and a 16th, but he faced a very promising horse in First Mission, and perhaps the connections were just trying to get just enough points to get into the Derby without squeezing the lemon dry.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, obviously it's not ideal that they had to even run in the Lexington 3 weeks ago just to get into this field. I'm sure they wouldn't have wanted to do it that way if they didn't have to, but he got the points to get in. I would also just point out, Dan, in the Lexington, and we saw the stretch run there, he didn't really, finish that strongly. I don't think that's the kind of race that's going to get anybody interested in him, but he was cutting back a full 1/8 of a mile in that race, which is not an easy thing to do. I just thought he got a terrible ride early in that race. He just gave away tons of position into the first turn behind another slow pace. So I didn't want to be too hard on him for it. I thought his first 2 starts this year were both way better than they looked in races that he couldn't possibly have won. And the best race he's ever run, Dan, the Louisiana Derby, the only time he really got to go a distance of ground. I thought he ran great that day. I think he can rebound here if he can get the right trip.
Potential place player is up next. That's the number 12, Jace's Road. This horse went gate to wire in the Gun Runner at the fairgrounds in his final start as a 2-year-old and might have had excuses in his first 2 starts. The Southwest was a wet track. He didn't get close to the lead, which is probably his preferred spot. In the Louisiana Derby, he broke through the gate before, and maybe that affected him because after that, the trip was fine. He sat right off of Kingsbarns' moderate pace and then just couldn't forge by and was no match for Disarm, who did not have the easiest pace scenario. This horse does have to improve.
Yeah, he does. He's one of the horses who has an awful lot in front of him here if he's going to be effective in this race. It's not that he's not untalented, Dad. I think he does have some ability. I also kind of feel like the Brad Cox wants this horse to maybe be on the lead in this race, and I'm not sure that that's going to work out for him. He obviously has to take a pretty significant step forward here.
Sun Thunder, the number 13, is one of the strongest closers in this race. He'll get blinkers on for the first time for trainer Ken McPeak. Second in the Risen Star behind Angel of Empire. That was a race where the pace collapsed, and they both came from way out of it. Sun Thunder had a big look at it, just missed by a length. In the Louisiana Derby, it was a completely different scenario. He had no chance the way the race was run with his running style. In the Bluegrass, maybe not the cleanest trip. He was running on a little bit at the end. Give him some pace, give him the right trip. I can see him outrunning his 50-1 odds.
That's fair enough way to look at him, Dan. I mean, certainly his race 2 back, you want to give him, a pretty big benefit of the doubt there. He didn't have a fair chance. I kind of felt like the 2 surrounding races, though, I didn't really see huge excuses for him. I just kind of felt like he did the best that he could do, and he wasn't quite good enough. And obviously, he's going to need to take some kind of huge step forward or catch some huge breaks in order to be effective in this race.
The number 14, Angel of Empire, comes into this race following 2 victories in major preps. The Risen Star at the fairgrounds, coming from off that solid pace, and then this race. This was, I think, his best race to date, the Arkansas Derby, and both races were at 1 1/8, so he has a lot of foundation. Angel of Empire made a giant sweeping move on the turn, and then was able to sustain that bid all the way through the wire. Career best buyer of 94. I think he's coming into this race the right way for who else? Brad Cox.
I like the way he's headed as well. His last 2 races are both really good. They're the best races he's run by far. As a matter of fact, this horse has lost once on dirt, and he was badly compromised in that Smarty Jones going a mile with no pace in front of him there. He still ran well. I like him. I think there's a real chance that he's finishing strongly in this race. And if he's within range at the top of the stretch, I think he's dangerous. The one little thing that holds me back is, first of all, I don't think he's going to be a great price in this race. And the more I look at that Arkansas Derby last time, he was super impressive. I think that was a pretty bad race overall.
The 15 is Forte, the morning line favorite, the 2-year-old champion of 2022. He's won 5 consecutive races for Todd Pletcher, including the Florida Derby, and he had to work for this one at 1-5. Mage has made the lead. Mage ran by Forte on the turn. Forte's got a lot of work to do. He gets to the outside, he gets to the clear, and he's able to get Mage in the last 150 yards or so. This, I think, is a race where maybe the fans were a little bit rough on him on social media. I don't think they should have been. I like how he finished it up.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I mean, I've seen plenty of horses with 2 or 3 lengths to make up in the final eighth of a mile at Gulfstream and not get there. And not only did Forte get there, he got there pretty easily over a pretty good horse at Mage. So I'm not going to be hard on him for that. His Fountain of Youth was a walk in the park off the layoff after sitting a good trip. So you're talking about a horse who he runs a 100 buyer in his final start at 2. He hasn't surpassed that number yet. But I think there are mitigating circumstances, Dan. I think he's every bit as good now as he was then.
The number 16, Raise Cain, took advantage of circumstances when winning the Gotham, a one-turn mile. It was a wet track. He really seemed to appreciate it. He also got a great in-out closer's trip and ride under Jose Lezcano in a race where the pace fell apart. He then ran in the bluegrass last time out. He was no match for Tapit Trice. Didn't have a great post position, passed some tired horses late. I still think he has some things to prove despite winning the Gotham 2 back.
I do too. I mean, he's going to be some kind of huge price in here if you like him. You know, his bluegrass wasn't a total disaster, but he wasn't, ever really a threat in that race. His Gotham was good, but he had all the best of it that day. He's just a horse he's got an awful lot in front of him here in this Kentucky Derby, but he's a huge price if you like him.
One of the 2 Japanese-trained entrants is up next, the 17, Derma Sotogake, who ran in the Saudi Derby and was third 2 starts back, but maybe that mile was just a little bit sharp for this horse. He won the UAE Derby, and he did it very impressively. The inside, I thought, seemed good this day. He broke from the rail. He went right to the front. It was a merry-go-round race. They ran 1, 2, 3 all the way around the track, but Derma Sotogake did this strong, and he did it in fast time.
Yeah, exactly. It's a visually pleasing race, but he certainly had all the best of it here. There's just really nothing happening behind him. I like the way that he did it. To me, he's one of the tougher reads in the race because, at least, from the way I look at it, it's just hard for me to evaluate his form over in Japan. I liked some of those races, but I didn't love them. And I struggle with how much credit I want to give him for the UAE Derby. He looked good winning that race. I don't know what it all means, Dan. And I also just kind of feel like he's got a little buzz around him here and he's not going to be a great price.
The great trainer Bill Mott's going to add blinkers to the number 18, Rocket Can. The winner of the Grade 3 Holy Bull 3 starts back, although I think it's fair to say that this year's Holy Bull wasn't the strongest edition of the race. He was beaten by Forte in the Fountain of Youth. He ran okay that day. Forte just was better. Last time out in the Arkansas Derby, he was wide, but he was in good position, and he just couldn't go with Angel of Empire when that one lurked around him. He's got to do better. I think he's just sort of incrementally improving, and he needs to improve a lot more.
Yeah, that's why the blinkers are likely going on here, Dan. Bill Mott's just looking to get something a little extra out of this horse, and he obviously has a lot of work to do. His Holy Bull was fine, but it wasn't a particularly strong race. I don't like anything he did in his next 2 starts.
Lord Miles was beaten by Rocket Can in the Holy Bull, but that was a one-race blinker experiment that didn't work very well. He was beaten by Tapit Trice in the Tampa Bay Derby, although he might have run a little bit better than the line looks, and he scored the Wood Memorial last time out at a huge, huge price. He's almost 60 to 1. We turn into the stretch. Here's Lord Miles on the outside. Hit Show, who had the tough outside post, is directly to his inside. He's going to try to squeeze on through in between horses. Lord Miles wins a blanket finish.
He certainly took a nice step forward. He got a great trip in this race, Dan, and he's down in the clear on the outside here through the stretch. If you watch the head-on, you'll see Hit Show just sort of bouncing off the 2 horses to either side of him there. And Lord Miles gets the job done. I like that he improved. It's also, I think, at least worth pointing out, Dan, that we talked about this with Tapit Trice before, a horse who doesn't seem like he wants to be inside. That might be the case with Lord Miles, too. Tampa Bay Derby, the Holy Bull, he was just sort of on the inside the entire way and didn't really kick hard. He was in the clear last time and he kicked. His first 2 starts, he was down the outside and he kicked. I think he wants to be in the clear. Can he run as well in the Derby as he did in the Wood Memorial?
But from this post 19, he should be in the clear, as should the 20, Continue R, the other Japanese-based entrant. This horse, I think, wants distance, and a lot of it, and he's going to get it in the Kentucky Derby. The Saudi Derby was a mile. I think it was too sharp for him. In the UAE Derby, he was third when they went 1, 2, 3 all the way around the track, maybe compromised by race flow, although no match for Derma Sotogake that day. They've worked together at Churchill Downs. Derma Sotogake has looked better than Continue R. So Continue R is going to have to do a lot at a giant price.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, he's another horse who's hard for me to evaluate. I do think that the longer distances probably really work for this horse. He's going to be a huge price, though. And if you're, one of those people who just believes that, these Japan horses are going to keep winning all the international races, you could probably do worse than this horse.
We don't want to be rich struck, so we'll talk quickly about the three also eligibles in this field. Cyclone Mischief, third in the Florida Derby. Bit of an in-and-out campaign. Looked very good winning that first level allowance. The Holy Bull was no good. Solid, but no match for Forte in his last two.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly improved a little bit in those last two, Dan, but he was no match, and I didn't really see the excuses for him. Obviously, his prior two graded stake starts weren't any good at all. He feels like he's got his work cut out for him if he gets in.
Mandarin Hero didn't face the quality of competition that either Derma, Sotogake, or Continuar did in Japan, but he ran big in the Santa Anita Derby, finishing second. It looked like Kazushi Kimura really wanted to get him out inside the quarter pole and into the stretch. He couldn't. He eventually got to the two path, and he tried hard. He earned a 100 buyer. If he gets into this race, he deserves some respect.
Yeah, he's a horse that I think you want to take pretty seriously if he somehow finds a way to get into this race on Saturday. His form in Japan was good. He ran great in the Santa Anita Derby.
King Russell is a one-time winner. He was second in the Arkansas Derby at a huge price. He was no match for Angel of Empire that day. He seems to be progressing. Maybe the Preakness?
Yeah, maybe the Preakness. I don't know. We'll see if he can, continue to develop here. I thought his Arkansas Derby was fine. Maybe took advantage a little bit, just sort of sitting back and then running through the stretch to just get up for second.
Top pick time for the Kentucky Derby, the Run for the Roses. We respect Forte, but I want prices in this race. Two fills. We'll see if he can drift a little bit off that 12-1. He has the fast figure, albeit on a synthetic surface. If I had to make excuses for his race 2 and 3 starts back, it was those paces were solid. He kind of made the first or second run into the teeth of that pace before flattening out. He seems to be working well at his Hawthorne base. Mike, you're going for a big bomb with Disarm. I loved his race 2 starts back in the Louisiana Derby. Last time was disappointing, but I think you made a very good excuse about him cutting sharply back in distance in the Lexington.
Yeah, those short stretch races too at Keeneland, they just don't work for this horse at all. That was also the case in his first start this year at Oaklawn, the short stretch. That doesn't benefit this horse. Listen, he's obviously a bit of a reach here. He needs to run the race of his life, but the potential was there at 2. I think he has huge excuses for all 3 starts this year. And we've already seen what these horses can do, Dan. The better horses in this race, when they get good trips, we've already seen what they can do. I don't think Disarm's had a good trip yet this year.
Like you, I have a lot of respect for the 10 practical move. I think he'll run his usual good race. Curious to see what Skinner can do. If he could take that move forward, he'll be running late. Mike's going 11-10-5-1. I'm going 3-17-10-9. One of the more competitive editions we've seen of the Kentucky Derby. Best of luck.